All right, dudes, buckle up. This is Trent's ancient temple. This is gonna be all photo bashing, baby. This is gonna be a photo bashing, baby. This is a time lapse video. Obviously, nobody can even photo bash that fast. Come on. One of the first things that you're gonna notice is that I'm not drawing nothing. I don't even bother to put a single line down. I borrowed a bunch of images that I just ganked right out of some dude's vacation photos, some dude on Facebook. No, I'm just kidding. These came from Google. One of the tricks that I found to using photographs is if you set the layer to lighten, then it's only going to pull up the elements on the foreground layer, on that layer that are lighter than the layer below it. And so you can get some interesting, really organic kind of materials and shapes out of that. That comes in especially handy when you've got if you're blending really organic shapes. And it's also very useful when you're doing buildings, or especially if you're doing decaying stuff. You can set a layer to darken and then add a texture to a surface, so you can make a very nice modern looking building look kind of dilapidated and worn, weathered. I'm not really gonna draw anything right away. I wanted to just lay down some basic shapes, man. I wanted to I like that mountain. I'm gonna gank that mountain. Why not? I like that river. Let's just yank that river. So I immediately started using color, and then very soon after, I realized I don't want to use color. So I switched it to grayscale, or I desaturated the hell out of it, and then I just started working with the photos as if they were my sketch. You know what I'm saying? Because there's a lot of rocks. There's a lot of organic shapes that, geez, if you were to sit down and actually paint out every one of those, man, who's got that kind of time? Who's got that kind of time, man? Especially we're making concept art for high tech, futuristic games, man. That means a lot of detail. That's a lot of detail I don't want to draw. That's a lot of detail I don't think many people have the time to draw. So what's very important to game developers is doing it on the cheap. And the cheapest way to make a mountain is to steal a mountain. So that's what we do. We this really goes against a lot of the way that I used to do things, the way that I've always done things. I always had like a mental block about, I guess I would have called it an ethical block about using photos, and it was just silly. There was a key moment where I really started to ask myself, am I just making this harder for myself? Am I putting up the barricade that's keeping me from finishing more paintings more quickly? And the answer was yeah, man. I was doing it to myself. I was hamstringing myself, man. It's and admittedly, I learned a lot, from all those years of just doing sketching. And I'm not saying this is my new process or anything like that, but I wanted to try it. I wanted to adopt some new kind of approaches to things, and why not? I mean, I can do that. I can get away with that. Some of the key takeaways, man, some of the key things that I noticed was one, if you like a shape, make a brush out of it. Two, if you really like a mountain or something like that, but you want to separate your elements between foreground and background, get in there. If you keep them on separate layers, you get in there with an airbrush and you just blast that a little bit with just a dab, just a hair, just a little smidge of a separation of values. Because we're working, because I got rid of all the color, it was a lot easier to separate foreground from background using values and hard edges versus soft edges. Usually things in the background are going to be soft edge. Things in the foreground are going to be a little bit more hard edged. I would say within the first hour, I stopped photo bashing and I started going into drawing. I used some gradient maps to give a little bit of color to the things that I was doing, but then I realized I'm terrible with lighting right out of the gate. My focus has usually been on production art, which is like drawing, I guess, drawing and designing. I love how things work, and I love designing how things work. So doing these sort of vista paintings, not my specialty, not my specialization. I tend to focus on the drawing and the planning and the designing of things. And in that way, in some ways, I think it makes me like a little bit of a better director than a production guy. But whatever the case, this was a new experience for me, new processes, new challenges, new ways of going about it. I immediately realized that I didn't even want a desert kind of a setting. I wanted to diversify so much away from, or diverge so much away from the original photos that you can't even recognize them. You could not find the original photos in this image. It is just so distinctly different. And then I tried to do it as a nighttime scene. That really didn't work. So ultimately I went with like Frozen Mountain. That's my default. If something isn't working, I cover it in snow. That's yeah, it makes it so much easier. Then I started drawing in. I thought it'd be really neat to kind of get a little bit of this animated effect and have these highly detailed environments, and then do sort of not cartoony, but more stylized characters in the foreground. And I got an interesting result. And you'll see that popping in a second here. But one thing to note is I kept a lot of things on different layers so that I could go in, grab something, separate it out. I used color here to really pop out my foreground from my background. I started color dabbing a lot from the background and just painting in. The process is so organic. It's not like a strict. I don't have any formal training on how to photo bash. I don't have any formal training on how to even paint. I was pretty much self-taught through almost all of my years of painting and drawing. And it somehow magically, miraculously kind of works together if you've been doing it long enough. If you've been faking it long enough, eventually you know what you're doing. It's no longer faking it. And it's actually true of a lot of things. You know, but another thing that I do is this was inspired by a bunch of Gumroad videos that I had seen. Some other artists that I follow do Gumroad videos. Gumroad is a way for people to distribute videos or books or PDFs or educational stuff. It's a way for people to sell their own stuff. And I, of course, have my own videos up on Gumroad, but a lot of artists started doing this a couple of years back, and I love to dip into how, you know, seeing how they do their process. In the beginning, so many Gumroad videos were just awful, not educational at all. It was just almost like a money grab or something like that. But in time, people began to learn how to show their process a little bit more and how to educate and how to really communicate what they had learned. So, you know, I don't want to get all philosophical about art schools or anything like that, but I'll tell you what, man. I'll tell you what. I know some dudes that go to art school and they end up with $100,000 in debt from their school loans. And when they get to those art schools, they end up finding out that they could have learned everything that they needed to know from just going to YouTube and buying people's Gumroad videos for a fraction of the cost. But the big challenge is that discipline. A lot of times you need that discipline, that regimented classes at this hour with this teacher, and he's like giving you feedback on your process and things like that. And that's super valuable. But I mean, for like once you've got your sort of foot in the door, or you have a level of experience down and a level of confidence in your abilities, like just don't waste your money and time on that. Just get into picking up whichever artist that you really like. Pick up their Gumroad videos. Pick up their you know, follow their processes. These days, it's so much easier for artists to communicate with a fan base and with a group of followers, and to show their skills and their techniques, and to share that with the community. And it's a very, very sharing kind of a community, which is kind of awesome. It's kind of an awesome time to be an artist in any industry, I think. Well, not any industry, but it's an awesome time to be a artist in the digital age. I will say that, especially if you're trying to learn new techniques. And of course, production art versus artiste, the artiste. That's a very different, that's a different argument altogether. So key takeaways, key things that I learned from doing this piece. One, just get something in there. Get a sense of like a flooring area. Have an idea, a basic idea of what you wanted to do. All I knew was that I wanted to do a valley. I converted it all to black and white pretty early on so that I could just focus on the values. I used selections to sort of flatten things out and try to create, you can actually create some very interesting organic natural brushes from photographs. I highly recommend you checking that out. Another thing that was a key takeaway was to just use the photos as a sketch. For me, anyway, at this time. There might come a time when I use a little bit more. It would be interesting to use some 3D models. I know that you could rough out a plane in Maya or Modo, or you could even use something free like Blender to block out some basic shapes and then use that as your perspective grid. I don't really do a lot with perspective because I could just build a little block model of it, and then paint over that. Other takeaways: get in your own style. Don't be bound by the photos. That was a big trick psychologically. I was kind of torn between just what was there and what I wanted to do with it. And the answer should always be just trust in yourself a little bit and explore. Ultimately, the final result is either a tremendous painting that you feel proud to have in your portfolio, or that meets the requirements of what your team needs, or it's something that you personally grew on. A final result can just be that you learned something really tremendous from doing that piece. And that's really what this one was about. I don't have a story for this one. It's just Twilight Monk, but I don't know what to do with it yet. Someday I'll find out. Anyway, that about wraps this one up for me. Speaking of Gumroads, earlier on I was mentioning that I like to watch other people's processes. Well, I also post a lot of my own videos and my own tutorials and processes on a service called Gumroad, which basically just allows you to download really long videos, some of them in box set 2. You can get a lot of uncut videos that are like sometimes 2 or 3 hours long, and you can really dissect the process and slow it down and say like, oh, he used this layer effect or this kind of paintbrush or tool to get this result. The other one is box set volume 1, and that's a lot more of the philosophical approach to conceptual design and illustration. So whichever one that you feel is most suitable for where you're at, there's options there for you. Also, I want to thank you guys so much for stopping by, and we will see you guys in the next video. And until then, remember to photo bash with passion. Okay, that's it for me. I'll catch you guys in the next video. Ciao.